Hi, I'm Philip Myers, author of SQUISHED, Jackie Kennedy, Espionage, Murder, and Me. This book resulted from a 2.5-year collaboration with Mrs. Kennedy on a true Cold War espionage story. When she found out how I came across this story, she said to me, "You're going to end up squished in a trash can somewhere." Hence the title. The book's available on Amazon in paperback and ebook. So I hope you'll enjoy this introduction to Squished. Here we go. Bolts Out of the Blue. That's the title of the opening. There's an odd closeness that develops when someone involves you in the quest to solve the murder of a loved one. Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy Onassis told me she loved the spy master, Leonid Tarasuk, after he moved to New York from Leningrad in the early 1970s. And to our mutual surprise, the investigation of his murder linked it to the murder of her husband, the president. One sunny fall afternoon in 1992, I found myself sitting in the library of her apartment at 1040 Fifth Avenue in New York, watching her share memories of a murdered Russian who had spied for the United States with his best friend, a Russian nuclear physicist, who was also part of the spy group. Both of them, Gulia, who was sitting across from me that afternoon, and Jackie, had loved Leonid. Jackie and the murdered spy master had been intensely close after he went to work at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in the early 70s, about a decade after the JFK assassination and shortly after the death of Aristotle Onassis, her second husband. Leonid was her primary collaborator on the book she edited about an exhibit at the Met, In the Russian Style. And their friendship had continued. When he wasn't making trips back to the Soviet Union on a fake passport to buy arms for Iraq from Russia, he was stopping by her apartment on his way home from work. When the surviving Russian spy, Gulia, first told me the story of the 1950s plot to warn the U.S. of a Soviet nuclear first strike, there was no suggestion that Leonid had been murdered. He died in a car crash in 1990 in France. It was Jackie who introduced the idea of the murder to our project, and everything thereafter in our research, including psychics we'd consulted, indicated that she had been right. At that point, we didn't know who ordered the hit or how far the story went. Jackie and I were sure there was still something very large we hadn't uncovered. And it proved to be right. The research ultimately would uncover a likely Soviet mole high in the U.S. government who had served as chairman of the Democratic Party and apparently had 2 murders on his hands. The afternoon in her apartment had something of the feel of a wake, albeit a very small and private one. For once, in Jackie's presence, her piercing eyes were focused on someone else. I was able to look around the room as I hadn't previously, to see the family pictures, her copy of JFK's Pulitzer Prize-winning book Profiles in Courage on the shelf beside me, and the snapshots of the grandkids that were scotch-taped to a mirror. It was an incredibly intimate experience. When it began to be apparent that the story we were researching, Gulia and Leonid's story, touched on the JFK assassination, I thought she would bail out of the book research project. But she didn't. She was fearless. She was free. She was very, very smart. It took me a while to figure out how my life was similar to that of the former First Lady. She had been married to the president and later to the richest man in the world. I was a Methodist preacher's son from small-town Pennsylvania. On the face of it, we were not 2 peas in a pod, and yet we were. The JFK assassination had been a bolt out of the blue. It shaped and colored the rest of her life and how people reacted to her. My bolt out of the blue was a hidden tale of Cold War espionage that fell on me without warning while I was in the Soviet Union on business. Suddenly I knew spies. Suddenly I was in the middle of a hunt for a Soviet mole in the US government. And suddenly I was researching the murder of Leonid, the spy master, with the woman who had been his intimate friend. Gulia and Leonid had wanted to save the world from the insanity of a nuclear first strike. Squished is the story of how our bolts from the blue tied us together. And ultimately, it's the story about who made those two murders happen. Squished. I hope you'll read the rest. Thank you.